in the room? Fascinating. So Jimmy grew up poor in New York. He was sweeping floors at the record plant in the 1970s. Easter Sunday 1973, he's kind of learnt how to do a bit of the engineering board. Easter Sunday 1973, he gets called into work. And he's gone up Italian Catholic in New York, and it was a test. Can you come and work the board? Our engineer hasn't turned up. He goes into the record plant, and his very first job is John Lennon, right? And many of you in the room will have heard of Bruce Springsteen, Stevie Nicks, 50 Cent, Eminem. Who's heard of Beats? The headphones. That's Jimmy and Dre. Headphones already existed. They made them cool. These are the headphones you wear when you want to have fun. And he sold it to Apple 4 years after he made it for $3 billion. This is a guy who could see over the horizon, still can, saw music streaming coming and realised that he didn't want to be the guy to sell the last CD. So if you want to view it as a leadership piece, that's fantastic. And I reckon Jocko's a bit of fun. He's an ex-Navy SEAL who does a series of massive podcasts. If you're interested in his views on the psychology of military incompetence, which might be where my best friend picked it up from, episode 303 onwards, he talks through an array of things. But Jocko's most famous for writing a book called Extreme Ownership. And when I look around the health system as a whole, around the country and around the world, I see extreme disownership. I don't see anyone actually taking responsibility for how the system runs. It's really hard to find anyone. So that's your homework. This is me before I had all my cosmetic work done in uni. I think that was 1988, give or take. Around about the same age as my son, who's hiding away mortified in the back row. We work there, Western Australia. We say we work in the biggest ambulance jurisdiction in the world, but your chances of getting an ambulance in the middle of the desert are extremely low. We call it 2.5 million square kilometres with 2.5 million people. The reality is most of us are clustered around the coast. And then there's lots of barren wasteland and farms. And there are some of the Blue Shift WA paramedics here, Gret and her mates, so good to see some of my old ambulance colleagues. My journey started at Fremantle Hospital, and Sandy Henderson was there, so I'm meeting some old friends. John, her husband, spanked me at tennis from time to time, so I didn't really feel like I was going to know anyone other than Q and Dylan, but that's where my journey started. And Fremantle Hospital was a tremendous place, so full of characters in those days. Ian Peake was a general physician who used to drive between B block and V block, which is about 900 metres. He used to drive so he could light off a few durries on the way. We had various wild medical consultants in a way that I think all of those characters have kind of been bred out. Serge Bajada was big on the swinging scene. He was a neurologist. Drove a 308 Ferrari as a daily driver back when Ferraris were not reliable, right? It was quite a place. So I finished my emergency medicine training when I was 29 because I was a child prodigy. And then I went and did a jellyfish PhD. So if anyone in the audience has any burning jellyfish questions, I brought out my Coronex Fleckeri t-shirt, especially for tonight's talk. And I got absolutely nothing out of that PhD. Like most PhDs. Is there anyone in the room who's got anything from a PhD? I'll take that as proof. So then I did some time at Joondalup, which is on the right, and I was the ED director at the Sheltered Workshop at Murdoch, which is at the time Perth's only private emergency department. I was there for 5 years, and that was a great job. And one of my old colleagues from there, Rebecca Wong, was here at the event. Don't know if Rebecca's in the room tonight. Which brings me to today. I work for CareFlight in the Northern Territory. Some of this talk's designed to get a few giggles, and there's no giggles about a plane. The same plane's on that photo twice. So that's VHNGA at the bottom right, and that's VHNGA, a West Wind 2 being pulled out of the ocean off the coast of Norfolk Island when our team, this is all public record, and I'm not joking about this, but our team did a controlled landing onto water on the 18th of November 2009, and I was the medical director for that flight, and transport risk was brought very sharply into focus for me, because that was a relatively routine patient move that we were doing deep into the small hours of the morning. And on reflection, it was probably unnecessary, and that incident changed everyone's life. Everyone survived. I don't know how many of you watched the 60 Minutes version of it or reviewed it, but essentially the team had 3 passes at the runway at Norfolk Island and could not get visual. If you're in a jet and you're long, you crash, and if you're short, you crash, and if you're lateral, you crash. So you have to be able to see the runway to land, and it was very, very horrible. And then no talk of mine would be complete without my time in the Army. That's VH Biff up on the top right, which is a BK117 that I spent many weeks on out in the Mount Bundy training area in the Northern Territory. I don't know if we've got any soldiers in the room, but that is a god-awful place. So I often talk about when I was in the Army, toughest 11 days of my life. where you come to the realisation that what you didn't have for dinner is served up for lunch the next day. And it's a great, tremendous weight loss program. And then I was a cruise ship doctor for a while on the Clipper Odyssey. Prof Jacobs was my mentor and did everyone the disservice of literally dying on the job, physically at Royal Perth, standing next to Danny Fatovich, a friend of mine, had his critical neurosurgical incident and did not survive. He was a great friend of mine and mentor. So I found myself the ambulance medical director in Western Australia under, I don't know, less than ideal circumstances, Q, you might say. And that was a great job, 2015. I thought I might share some things with the younger crowd in the room. Some of the more mature folk out there will remember this. Can you imagine a world where ramping does not exist? It did not exist. No one wore scrubs to work. How freaky was that? And Mike Hall used to wear shorts and long socks. Has anyone worked with Mike? He's been in Canberra for a long time. He was the inventor, in my mind, of the Mike Hall test, which is if someone walks into an ED like that, they've got appendicitis, you just got to call the surgeon. It doesn't matter. You don't need to do any bloods or imaging or anything else. And we had a lot of patients back at Fremantle in those days who were great characters. And I won't use this guy's real name, but if we were to call him Les, for instance, Les used to come in every day for a Ventolin puffer. And Sandy, you might have met him. But there's 250 puffs in a Ventolin puffer, right? And we could not figure out what was happening. So Mike followed him home to the men's home one day. Les is trading Ventolin puffers for cigarettes out the front of the men's home. And he wouldn't accept generic salbutamol. Asmol, I'll be like, Doc, that stuff does not work. I'm not having it. And I think it was worth less cigarettes than Ventolin. True stories, right? I'm not sure these characters are still around. And then I couldn't quite put it on Twitter, but But there's a generation of your medical colleagues who have drunk alcohol at work, and it was fantastic. So Friday lunchtime, when we were doing orthopaedics, the consultants used to take us to the Norfolk for fish and chips and a pint of beer, and occasionally a second pint of beer, and then we'd go and operate that afternoon. Right? And it was full view of the hospital, and my job was to hold the leg, because they didn't have, I was a human leg holder. And you can do that intoxicated, and it's fantastic. And we kind of laugh, but my point is that who's been drug tested at work here? Just doctors and nurses. Has anyone been drug tested at work here? Put your hand down if it was because you work for an aviation company. No? There's one of us. Isn't that scary in a safety-conscious industry? Because I've been drug tested at work, but the only reason I've been drug tested at work is because I work in aviation-sensitive environments. Right, we think healthcare is about safety. I'm standing in a bad spot here. I'll come over here. Right? Who's been drug tested at work? 1 people in a room of 100, 150. It's not much, is it? Not much at all. Right, so I want to talk about some leadership lessons, and I'm not sure if it was Luke or Ollie who, in the talk before mine, we haven't colluded, but aeromedical retrieval teaches you the difference between ideal situations and being a team player in a tough game. Right, and just want to let that sink in. And I think we could substitute aeromedical retrieval for pre-hospital care and emergency medicine, which I imagine encompasses most of the room. And you've just got to do some stuff that doesn't really sit well from time to time. And in fact, a couple of weeks ago, I think I'm one of only 4 people in the world to have ever done Perth, Bali, Broome, Ayers Rock, and Melbourne in one day, because why would you? Number one, and secondly, it'd be really expensive. But we rolled into, we brought a sick patient out of Bali. This is not long ago. Are there any, before I offend everyone, are there any ICU nurses in the room? Thank God. They are mean, right? Oh, hang on, there is one. All right. Won't point you out. I'm sure you're one of the few lovely ones down the left-hand end of the bell curve. There's got to be some triage nurses here, right? People who do triage? Yeah. So those of us who do transport would appreciate it if you'd just be a little nice when we arrive. So I rolled into a nameless ICU in Melbourne that was kind of near St Kilda Road and Commercial Road. Having had this patient for 12 hours, we'd lost 3 lumens on our quad lumen central line. We'd lost 2 of our infusion pumps during the trip. And for various reasons, we've ended up on quadruple diluted noradrenaline infusion. Because that's what we had. And I rolled in to that ICU at about 2 a.m. The very first question I got was, what dose of noradrenaline is that patient on in milligrams per kilogram per minute? And I said, I don't know. It's the same dose they were on when I picked them up in Bali, and their blood pressure was fine. And things got a bit awkward after that. And on the way out, I had a little moment with my team, a little unprofessional moment where I said, if they just could have said thank you, right? Because we had some stuff to deal with. Well, that was our stuff, but we had some stuff to deal with during that flight. So that was a little taste of what my paramedic colleagues put up with on a daily basis in some locations. I'm having a laugh here. I have exaggerated ever so slightly. But yeah, that's one of the things I'm doing now. Now this is Dion Brink's. This is Dion Brink. It's true though, right? And I want to talk to you about the immune system shortly. But But you try and keep everything the same in the pre-hospital world, and it's a nightmare. And then you try and change anything, and you've done it wrong. Is anyone familiar with the immune system? Now, you've all encountered it. So the immune system is that system that kicks into play when you try and change something, right? And people give you, oh no, sorry, you can't do that. Why would we try and improve patient care when we're doing this other stuff? Why would we want to have an electronic medication register rather than the old paper ones that no one checks? Too hard, not doing it. And once you're on the lookout for the immune system, you see it everywhere you go, right? So the immune system kicks in to make meaningful change impossible. And sometimes the immune system is just a few toxic people not wanting to do it, right? And guess what? We are the immune system, right? And believe it or not, your leaders aren't trying to make things worse. One of the things I think about a lot, so I coordinate aeromedical transfer, and I coordinate several hundred cases of aeromedical transfer per week in the Northern Territory and Western Australia. And I spend a lot of time thinking about, do I want quick or good? And this is no disrespect. And I land on quick almost every time. And with quick, I maximise available local resources and I try and get that patient moving. Because when I was in an ambulance environment, what I learned from the very best of my paramedic colleagues was that paramedics are awesome at maintaining momentum to definitive care, whilst taking great care of the patient. And it's a massive skill because it's so easy to get nailed in place and dot all the I's and cross all the T's. And you see this in EDs as well, with maybe last minute fussing around interfacility transfers. So you want the patient all tucked in and nice and everything down, and meanwhile their heart's dying, right? And the angioplasty is at the far end. So one of the things I spent a lot of time thinking about is how can we keep this patient moving, or at least moving in the best possible way. Okay, it's a long shot. You might be the only guy in the room who's going to have a chance, but anyone it's really hard.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, no worries, throwing my best mate under the bus. Horatio Nelson won the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805, was part of the Napoleonic Wars, right? Just stick with me here, it'll get better. Sorry, yeah, she's not big into this. Now, his most famous battle victory was the Napoleonic War, Battle of Trafalgar, in which he died. So I don't think that was really a particularly famous victory, but he talked about the Great Order. Now, his Great Order was that he was going to serve his king and destroy the French, right? And any other orders that he took, he would consider to be minor and breakable if they didn't go with this one. And what I see in emergency medicine and pre-hospital care is that we are lost collectively on what the Great Order is. Right? I really think that. That's a photo out of Royal Perth Hospital, and Michelle Johnson, one of my colleagues, talks about getting a news crew in and before they came in, or getting a photographer in and being worried that no good cases would turn up that day. This photo won a Walkley Award. That no good cases would turn up that day and it'd be some big disaster, and they'd have a journalist sitting around doing nothing, and about 30 seconds after the guys set up, a meth-affected individual came in. But what would the Great Order of emergency medicine look like? And ASIM tells us this is what emergency departments are supposed to do, right? And I do wonder how boarding mental health patients, taking care of admitted medical patients, minor injuries, because that's a lot of what we do, and we don't necessarily train for it, right? And the same with ambulance. What would the Great Order of ambulance look like? And I think funnily enough, Western Australia Health Department tells us what the great order is. It's to provide patient transport, pre-hospital care and vital support to our community in emergency circumstances. But I'll tell you what the great order of ambulance service in Western Australia is ramping. Right? Looking after patients after they've arrived in our emergency departments is the number one things our paramedics do because it trumps everything else. You can't go to a priority one in the community. You can't go and pick up Nana who's fallen on the floor and 7 hours ago. And I think we're a bit lost in that we don't know what the great order is. That's ramping. I googled Evel Knievel. Many of you are too young to know who he is, and I came up with Dangerous Dougie as the photo, who was a great motorcycle guy. So when I was ambulance medical director, I wasn't having any luck in convincing people that ramping was an issue, right? And so I did some media, and I said I was worrying that it was consuming ambulance resources, that clinical governance on the ramp was clouded, because in Western Australia we've got no agreement as to which doctor owns that patient, unlike every other state in the country, and that I was worried it was going to lead us to a bad place. And the health minister, who is now the Premier, said it's not true. And I would have felt that if your ambulance medical director says, you know, hey, we might have a problem, that would, that this is publicly available information, hey, we might have a problem, that would actually trigger someone to say, hey, what do you think the problem is? How might we look at it? What might happen? Now, when I did that media, which was August 2020, I was looking over the horizon as to what was going to happen. We've got no problem, nothing to see here. Our EDs are working really well, carry on. And so, anyone recognise that photo? I've been to Nisiko. No? I think that's the window of a Butcher too, one of the restaurants not far from here in Nisiko. But I feel like there's a lot of good people doing hard work in our emergency departments, but where I feel consistently is that we're operating in a failed healthcare paradigm. And the only solution that gets thrown at us is scale. We need more of. We want more beds, we want more paramedics, we need more this, we need more that. And my own version is that building a bigger bowl, you know, doesn't stop the blockage, right? And we always talk about building bigger bowls. So for 5 years, I was the most frequent attender at the Coroner's Court in Western Australia, other than the coroner, and to the point where we all had each other's phone number, right? Because when bad things happen, people in green, which is the ambulance colour in WA, when bad things happen, people in green are there. Now, none of those appearances were because my ambulance colleagues had screwed up, but I was there multiple times per year. And so everyone knows, and in your own jurisdiction, you will have famous cases that have been screwed up because the system's horrible. And I'm not gonna sort of name names. I don't really know who's in the room today, but one of them involved a young girl with Group B strep at our big children's hospital. One of them involved a patient with aortic dissection who spent 3 hours on the ramp in a small regional hospital without being seen before she died. And we all know that this is happening when those cases aren't happening, but we only get outraged when those cases happen. And we haven't done much. We haven't done much to fix it. And then there's these big media events, and you know the blame caster comes out. Whose fault was it? Because that's what a system that's not trying to improve kind of does. It looks for a scapegoat, right? And often that's the nurses or doctors working in the ED that shift. They were just unlucky enough to be on duty in a dysfunctional environment. Anyone in the room made multiple coroner's court appearances? I think I'm in double figures. Doesn't feel good to say it. No. Keep it that way. I mean, awesome. And don't try and outsmart a lawyer, ever. You know, because, yeah. Is that a microphone? Yes. That's all you need to say. So I think that we're missing the great order, and many of my colleagues talk about the ED being a safety net, being the final common resting place of stuff, and I think when we do that, we've lost the ability to see our sickest patients, and at some stage, I feel like we can't be the safety net anymore because actually can't have 19 admitted patients in our 15-bed department and keep it safe and do this and that. And yet here we are. And ramping started in Western Australia after it started on the East Coast. Like many things, we're 3 hours and 30 years behind. But thank you. We agree, and that's just how we like it. Eastern Staters. Ramping started off as my paramedic colleagues providing crisis overflow staffing to our EDs, right? And it's become us staffing our EDs, right? And again, during my tenure, we tried to say, hey, we've actually got really sick patients in the community we're not getting to, and maybe we should do that rather than looking after patients inside your ED. Well, might you laugh? There are other rules, but every year in our training college, I turned up and spoke to our trainees about, hey, just don't do that. And you'll be stunned at how hard that was for a group, right? And every doctor in this room is thinking of multiple colleagues who've had problems with number 2. And if you're a doctor, you can be rehabilitated because you can be put on supervised practice. They're not bad people, and you can find a way back. When you're a paramedic and you're in the back of an ambulance by yourself, it is really hard for your medical director to trust you after you've stolen opiates and then lied about it. It's a deal breaker, right? And it's such a shame. And then, don't sexually interfere with your colleagues or patients. There'll be many of our female colleagues in this room who will be reflecting that that's not funny because that happens, right? And it's very uncool, very, very uncool, and tends to be the perpetrators are white men, right? Maybe in society generally, but you would be stunned at how hard those things are to not do for a big group. And in spite of saying that in the college every 6 months to our new people, still got broken. And when you work for an ambulance service and your opiate prescription can be tracked, your opiate use can be tracked, and we can line the whole organisation up from the number 1 to the number 1,000. And by definition, there'll be a flow. But when the number 1 is 2 orders of magnitude larger than the number 2, our experience was there was always a problem. Right? Now, if ever you're in an interview, this is the very best interview question I've ever been asked or asked myself. When is it okay to break the rules? And the best answer is rules are the guide rails that smart people use to help them make good decisions. So one of the answers you get is never. It's never okay to break the rules. And where this question got asked to me was in a care flight interview. And when we were doing international medical retrieval, We used to pay for avgas in cash, like actual, bag of cash. And the price in Indonesia was always 30% more. And when is it okay to pay a bribe? If I ask this group, when is it okay to pay a bribe? Oh, no, we're not doing that. You've got a dying patient in the back, and that's normal. You stand on your high horse then, and that patient dies. It's a big problem. So it's an awesome thing to think about, and it really reveals your own thinking. When is it okay to break the rules? Okay. Any of the blue shift there at Tough Mudder that day when I reduced those shoulders? No. I believe firmly that I hold the Guinness Book of World Records for reducing shoulder dislocations in a single day at 8 in different patients. So this was the very first obstacle at Tough Mudder, which I think was held around the country. It was called electric eel. And those wires were electrified, and people were diving in and dislocating their shoulders. I was the on-site medic, and we weren't planning on doing this, but sending 10 dislocated shoulders, I didn't get 2 in. I don't know how many of them were dislocated, but hey, there's no imaging, so it was all good. And this little queue of patients who were either pre-fentanyl and midazolam, having a procedure, or post, right? And I got 8 in, and it was kind of good. Anyway, I did the Saturday, and this is the difference in my mind between men and women. I did the Saturday, and my colleague Shelley Kirkbright did the Sunday. And after the Sunday, Shell, how'd you go with all those dislocated shoulders? She said, PB, I just got them to dig a deeper pool, and there were none. Felt so good about myself until then. Now, there was a lot of my job I really enjoyed being the ambulance medical director. And I just want to touch very briefly on improving cardiac arrest outcomes. So we learnt from the best. We were flown all over the world. We redesigned the system facing high performance CPR. And sorry I haven't got years, but this is number of survivors per year. That's 1996. And that's 2022. And in 2018, we had a 50% increase in survival from about 120 a year to about 180. And it felt so good. We were creating living people out of people who had previously died. COVID happened. The organisation's attention went elsewhere. And our survivors kind of went back to that 120 to 130 channel, not privy to data anymore. But that's the team in the bottom left. Including myself, some paramedic colleagues, and then top right, I really liked that photo, which was two of our first aid trainers talking to a series of school kids. So when you've got a big organisation behind you, like, you can achieve some fun stuff, right? And there are many other good things as well. This is one from 14 Peaks, but repurposed. Please be kind to your leaders, because we are trying our best. We're not trying to screw it up on purpose, but far out, being in leadership positions during COVID was a real test of pain tolerance, right? And perhaps it's a test of pain tolerance normally. And again, probably 80% of our time was spent dealing with 10% of our paramedic sort of cohort, and I'm sure that's the same everywhere. I'm going to move along so we finish in time for the drinks function. I want to talk to you about, like, we were having a series of 10 times drug dosing errors. I don't know how many of you encountered them in urgent peds. And we dealt with it in the wrong way. We dealt with it by giving peds calculators, by saying you should check with your colleague, by saying you should phone a friend. But where I've landed on since is that in high noise environments, and I don't mean necessarily sound, but in high information environments, no one operates cleanly. It is really hard. Has anyone boxed in this room? Bros for life. Yeah. So, so when you're getting hit in the head, right, you can't add 1 and 1 at the end of a 3-minute sparring session, let alone anything else. Maybe getting hit in the head too much has produced my employment situation that you see today. But we should have been working on techniques to increase the channel width of our people, not to give them better calculators or better this or better that. And so this was just stressed people making dumb decisions. And they weren't making dumb decisions because they were dumb. They were making dumb decisions because they were maxed out, right? And the engineering solution on our side was to try and give them better tools and education in the college and all of this. It didn't work. We saw them at the same tempo as we had beforehand. I'll close off shortly. Give me 5 more minutes. I want to kind of run you through how that feels like. So when I went on, this is a hypothetical screen, when I went on the hey, ramping's bad, you see all the blue dots over on the left, they're available ambulances in the Perth metro area, right? And you see the standby capacity up the top of none and unallocated of 25, that's like the ED waiting room, except you haven't triaged them yet. That's just people who are waiting to be triaged. A number of them are going to be really sick. And at that stage, you know, in this hypothetical situation, there's 68 ambulances on the road, all 68 are occupied, and many of them are at hospitals. We were seeing that a lot. And then, I don't really know what happened, but we became the subject of deep media scrutiny, political scrutiny. A lot of it was focused on our CEO, Michelle, and even if I wasn't being recorded, I wouldn't have anything to say bad about Michelle. Spoke to her last week, so be very, very clear on that. I love this quote. So this is from 14 Peaks, and what Nimsdar is saying is, you've always got more to give. The emergency physician in me says, it can get worse. Right? And maybe you guys all feel the same. But this was him saying, I'm just mentally stronger than you. I'm going to keep going when you quit. Right? And I think that's something interesting that's in us all. So when you're the focus of deep media scrutiny, the aim is to avoid getting hit by shrapnel on body parts metaphorically, as other people get whacked, and then support everyone who's being blamed. Anyone in the room familiar with Rich Levitan? Yes, okay, thank you. Okay, so probably the most famous airway doctor in the world, but Rich talks about getting your beauty-death ratio right. And that's what I'm doing. I'm working on my beauty-death ratio. That's why I'm here. I've had enough of death outside of what's unavoidable. That's what the Dolomites look like above 3,000 metres. I love hiking. That was August this year, and I'm at my happiest when I'm outside. So I'm really, really focusing. When I left St. John, in my mind, I was recovering from moral injury, right? That's what I felt. But I've just been focusing on really being a better person, finding joy in life, and that's why I'm here with Matt this weekend. Q wrote me to talk, but that's what I'm doing here this week. So, any of you who are seeing mayhem in your professional lives, are really, really, and hey, you're here, so you're already sold in part. But think about intentionally going to find good things to do, and it's called the beauty-death ratio, the death-beauty ratio. I think, yeah, I've got 2 seconds. When you're busted, just own up, right? Because then you've done something wrong and you've lied about it. When 5 credible witnesses have saw you doing something and they're unrelated, and this is particularly a pre-hospital problem, because in hospital there's multiple eyes on almost every interaction, and for us doctors, our nursing colleagues are the patient's insurance policy. You might not have ever thought of it in that way, but our nursing colleagues keep it safe. And it's a very, very important role. and you should all be familiar with graded assertiveness and red carding your doctors. So getting involved in a parliamentary inquiry is a really bad prognostic sign for the ambulance medical director. Our organisation's 2 from 2. So you might as well just resign and get rid of the pain. And then I want to very, very briefly talk about resigning. So I don't want to go into the nitty-gritty. I'd offered to resign before. I resigned at 10 a.m. on a Monday morning, and at 2 p.m. I was no longer welcome in that building. And it was a bit like getting voted off the tribal council. Because I had all these friends and colleagues and stuff to do that I was neck deep in it Monday morning. Monday afternoon, I was on gardening leave, and then never to return. So yeah, and many people reached out, and I really appreciated that. Yeah, it was great. So I thought I was tall. I thought I was important, but I was just me. And in that photo, we've got 147 AFL games, 3 NBA rings, a medical degree and a PhD. That's how I like to describe it. Everyone recognise Luke? No? Far out. He's a young crowd. You know Michael Jordan? 3 NBA rings with Michael Jordan. Yeah, his job was to fight the monsters. He's a really interesting guy. Tells this great story about being in a limousine with Hulk Hogan, Dennis Rodman, a bowl of cocaine, and some girls. And that's Spider Burton on the left, North Melbourne and Fremantle. This is one of Jimmy's quotes. I'm at peace with everything, like it's good. It's the big picture. None of it was personal. I'm friends with everyone who I've worked with. I feel very fondly, very warmth towards St John and my mates in Green. There's no dramas whatsoever. I really miss it, but that's a part of my life that's gone. And very last slide. So when I was a young doctor, I want you all to think about this. I was the angry young man, right? Saw every problem, got really worried about it. One day at Joondalup, I was told the hospital was full, so I went upstairs and compiled a list of all of the empty beds and gave that to the nurse managing the hospital. That was seen to be aggressive. And as part of that, I got to do some remedial work, seeing how hard their job was. Not actually that hard at all, right? But I never would have said that to them. But more recently, I'm now the pebble on the beach, letting it all wash over me. And I think that's a good, it's actually probably a river rather than a beach, but I don't get troubled by anything. I do my best within the system. I'm finding great joy in what I'm doing at the moment. And working for WA Country Health and Carefly, and it's so awesome to not have to manage anyone, not have to go to meetings, not have to answer complaints, not have to answer anything else. Turn up, do your work, go home. And my final shout out, I forgot to mention Joss, who's my current colleague, who's in the room somewhere. We have good fun together, and it's great to be a different part of the system. So that's it. Can't believe everyone's made it this far. Thanks so much for the invitation to speak, and good luck for the drinks tonight. I think I'll be doing something else with Matthew Bailey. Cheers, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. And can we also have another round of applause for all our presenters this week? So this does draw the formal part of this week to a close. Tonight at Pirate Man, there won't be any speeches, no microphones or anything like that. It's all about just enjoying what has been a great week, both on and off the slopes. We will be kicking things off there at 7:30. Drinks will be flowing from 7:30 to 9:30. Dylan and myself would just like to say, yeah, a big thanks to our supporters, our presenters, and also all of you in the room as well. We love doing these events, and I think a big part of the success of these events is the social side of it and the willingness of people to meet someone different, get an understanding of what might happen on the other side of the doors, whether you're pre-hospital or in ED. So give yourselves a round of applause, I think. The other awesome thing that you've all achieved this week is that we have been able to donate $3,000 to Full Stop Australia, and so those goes towards our $10,000 goal for this year to give to stopping family domestic violence in Australia. So I think another round of applause to you guys. Thanks for that. That's it. So enjoy. Walk safely outside, although it shouldn't be too slippery. And we look forward to having a drink with you guys at Pirate Man. Cheers.
Recording number there.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for that. Sorry about the buzzing the whole
Yeah, I
time.
don't know. I felt like maybe it was it was okay. I felt like maybe it was the overhead somehow.
Was
The closer I got over there,
yeah, no, that was great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
so
really
much.
appreciate it. Yeah.
I was just looking for an excuse to bring one of my other kids, but I only got two. But
Excellent.
but, yeah,
Well, you know where we are every year, so yeah, no, I would love to. So, no, it was awesome. Well, here's your mate.
Yeah. Luke,